And good evening out there, everybody. This is RJ Carter with criticalblast.com. I am the author of The Destroyer Bully Pulpit, The Destroyer Continental Divide, and most recently, The Destroyer Monumental Terror. If you're hearing a lot of The Destroyer in those titles, there's a good reason for that. You might want to give a Google to Remo Williams and find out what that's all about. There will be more adventures forthcoming. I am not the creator. I am just the latest in a string of authors following in the footsteps of giants, and they are some pretty out there adventures, if I do say so myself. Tonight, I wanted to talk about Doomsday Clock. Now, the 12th issue of this Watchmen sequel just hit the stores this past Wednesday, and there's been some things bugging me about it that I wanted to talk about, but I wanted to wait till everything was over with before getting into it. First of all, I want to say that going into the story, if anybody was going to write it, Geoff Johns is definitely who I would trust. And Gary Frank's artwork on the thing has just been phenomenal. It's been a worthy sequel artistically, and what do I want to say here? Parallel-wise, it fits, it meshes. The storytelling devices are there. It's a mirror to what could have been a follow-up to Watchmen, a potential sequel to, well, more than a potential, it is a sequel, but there could be other sequels that ignore this story. For instance, the HBO series is a sequel, and it has nothing to do at all with Doomsday Clock. So which one is canon, which one is not, right? And I trust Geoff Johns to handle plot devices. I mean, Geoff is the guy who made sense out of Hawkman. Geoff is the guy who found a way to bring Hal Jordan back into the Green Lantern Corps. Geoff is the guy who figured out a way to pull Barry Allen back out of his Crisis on Infinite Earths death. Geoff Johns is a guy who can work magic in the DC universe, and can basically do no wrong. So I'm going to criticize something that he's done here, and then I'm going to try to prognosticate what it is that he might have been doing without coming out and saying that he did it. So you just switch over here and talk about Doomsday Clock. Now, this is going to look a little goofy because, hey, I'm using the free version of StreamYard, so I've got to show graphics whatever way I can, and that just happens to be with my graphics display program. So sorry it's not a full screen of these graphics, but we'll make do. Doomsday Clock, for those who are somehow living in a cave and not aware of it, is the sequel to Watchmen, wherein the Watchmen characters, at least some of them, are brought into contact with the standard DC universe. Now, I say standard DC universe, and all that means is that it's a universe that has Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, the Justice League, Firestorm, Captain Atom, all of those characters in it. That does not mean that it is the main DC universe that you're seeing in all the other titles. Well, RJ, how can you say that? I mean, we obviously know that this was a something that was begun in Rebirth #1, and something that was carried through in the Batman Flash crossover, The Button. So yes, it must obviously be the main DC universe. I don't see how it can be. I should have been. Quite frankly, Dick Giordano and Joe Orlando and Julie Schwartz and Jeanette Kahn, they would not have handled this way. I think Julie Schwartz is rolling over in his grave at the way this was so mishandled from an editorial standpoint. Again, this is not the storytelling on the part of Geoff Johns. Geoff Johns is no longer creative CEO, as far as I understand it. So this falls on the shoulders of Dan DiDio and Jim Lee for not shepherding this the way that they should have. Doomsday Clock had so many tendrils in it, impacting the characters of the DC universe, that in a proper handling, every main DC Universe title for the past year would have had a Doomsday Clock banner over the top of it, and we would have seen reverberations throughout each title. We would have seen every character having to deal with the suspicions being cast on them for the Superman theory. Are they or are they not created by the government? Is their origin story that we know a lie? And this could have really shook up things in the DC universe for those characters, like Firestorm, where we find their origin was maybe not exactly what we were led to believe it was all this time. So that is something that really could have had an impact on things that we were robbed of, because that did not happen. Regardless, Ozymandias and the new Rorschach come into the DC universe because Ozymandias has tracked the energy signature of Dr. Manhattan to this Earth, and he's trying to bring him back to the Watchmen Earth because, you know, Ozymandias' plan from the original Watchmen has been outed. He's a wanted criminal. The Earth is on the brink of destruction, and he thinks that only Dr. Manhattan can put it right. To that end, they have retrofitted the Night Owl's ship with whatever quantum tunneler device they needed. He's got the new Bubastis has parts of Dr. Manhattan in it that allows him to track him, and they've tracked him to the DC universe. Well, we meet him, Dr. Manhattan, about 6 issues in to the series, and that's when things get a little wonky, because what we find out is we know there's no Justice Society. The Justice Society's been missing. Well, why has it been missing? Because Dr. Manhattan erased them. There's a panel set here, and it's showing right now. He says, it's November 22nd, 1940. Alan is sitting at a round table wearing a mask, waiting to see who will speak first. Obviously, it's the first meeting of the Justice Society. It's January 8th, 1950. Alan testifies before the House Un-American Activities Committee. He refuses to implicate anyone in his employ. That's the 1950s McCarthy hearings that basically disbanded the JSA. It's July 16th, 1940. A young engineer named Alan Scott is riding a train over a bridge when it collapses. I moved the lantern 6 inches out of his reach. Alan Scott dies when the bridge falls. He leaves behind no family. In this one panel, it is revealed that Dr. Manhattan has been given a new superpower that he never had before, or so we must initially believe, and I'll get into that later. Dr. Manhattan, in all of Watchmen, sees time as a solid object. He can see multiple facets at the same time. He experiences all of it at once, which is very disorienting to him at times. When he's seeing 1950, he's not remembering. He says, I remember in 1950. He's saying it is 1950. He is experiencing that at a current moment. It is now to him. When he says it is 1980, it is 1980 now to him. Even if you're talking to him in 1985, from his perspective, he is in 1980 talking to you. However, at no time did Dr. Manhattan ever speak of a time and or place that he was not in. By that I mean that Dr. Manhattan was born in the 60s. He became Dr. Manhattan in the 60s. He was born in the 30s. Now, at no place in the story did Dr. Manhattan ever say, it is 650 BC and, you know, the Huns are attacking a group, because A, John Osterman was never there at that time, and he wasn't in that place. Dr. Manhattan can be in 2 places at once. He can be in 2 times at once, but he cannot, much like Sam Beckett in Quantum Leap, exist outside his own timeline. He can't see back before he was born. He wasn't there to experience it. And he did not ever travel the timeline to go to a place beyond his own existence. He travels in time the same way we do, 1 second per second, forward only. And he can see backwards and he can see forwards on that timeline, but only where he exists. Even in Doomsday Clock, the whole impetus is that he sees up through till tomorrow when he confronts Superman and things go black. He can't see the day after, he can't see the year after, he can't see 1,000 years after. He cannot see past his timeline, and his timeline in that universe would end that day. So we know that he can't see forward. It's presumable then that he should not be able to see backwards, and we've never seen him go backwards. And yet here he absolutely has to be a time traveler to be in 1940 DC universe. Now, he was in 1940s in his own universe as a child because he was born there. He left the Watchmen universe in 1985 by their timeline, which means he should have really come into this universe, the DC universe, in 1985, unless there was a little bit of a time discrepancy. But he was not in the DC universe in 1940 to experience the railroad collapse that created Alan Scott Green Lantern version. So, how does Geoff Johns account for this plot hole, this MacGuffin that he had to invent to make the entire series of Doomsday Clock have a plot? Because that is the plot, is that Dr. Manhattan has been screwing around with the DC universe and changing time, which he never did before. In fact, not only did he never travel in time before, he never changed things before. People would get pissed off at him because they would say, "You knew this was going to happen. Why didn't you change it?" And he would say, "Because that's the way it happens." He was never someone who would change things because, as he said it, we were all puppets. He was just a puppet that could see the strings. He was very much a predestination kind of guy. He did not alter the timeline ever. In fact, it was pretty much implied that he didn't have the power to do that. He was helpless to play a role through everything. So for Dr. Manhattan to have changed Alan Scott's life, Dr. Manhattan would have had to exist in the DC universe in its 1940. I posit that he did exist in the DC universe in its 1940. I posit that he did exist in 900 BC in Arthurian Camelot in the DC universe. I posit that he did exist in the Cro-Magnon era of the DC universe to meet people like Anthro, to meet people like the Immortal Man and Vandal Savage. Why do I believe this? Let's go back to Watchmen, the final chapter, when he is leaving the universe. And he's having his conversation with Adrian Veidt, which we now know as Veidt because, by golly, we've heard it said. And he tells Adrian, says, "Yes, I understand without condoning or condemning. Human affairs cannot be my concern. I'm leaving this galaxy for one less complicated." And Adrian says, "But you'd regained interest in human life." To which Dr. Manhattan replies, "Yes, I have. I think perhaps I'll create some. Goodbye, Adrian." And he's walking into this model of a world, model of a solar system, which looks very kind of sort of like any of the globes you might see on, the orrery kept by the monitors in the DC universe. My theory is that Dr. Manhattan existed in all those times I mentioned in the DC universe because he created the DC universe. He said he was going to create some life. He did create some life. He created the DC universe. As a basis for that belief, I give you this. This is this is Krona, the Mad Owen, who did the unthinkable, the unforgivable, the you can't do this kind of thing. He built the portal to look back at the creation of the universe. And in the DC universe, it has consistently been portrayed with Green Lantern number 40, with Crisis on Infinite Earths, with every crisis you can imagine, 0 Hour. The creation of the universe has always been portrayed by a hand grabbing a cluster of stars. And I point out now that the hand has always been electric blue. That is Dr. Manhattan's hand. He can change the past, or at least has chosen to change the past, because it's his past to change. If he created it, he can alter it. I don't know why that hasn't been a big thing in the DC universe. I believe it's because Doomsday Clock is being shunted to the side because it bumps heads with the current editorial pet project, Year of the Villain. And you can't have the DC universe being created by Dr. Manhattan if at the same time there are all these dark multiverses being populated around, and if at the same time we're finding out that the DC universe was created by some mad goddess named Perpetua, who's apparently evil but yet created all that there is. So there's too much conflict going on with different stories happening at the same time, because editorial can't get their heads together and ride herd on all these stories and get a rein on them so that they have a cohesive universe that makes sense. This is largely why it's impossible to read DC titles these days, because there is no cohesion between the universes. Every time you get used to one thing, timelines get shifted, stories quit making sense, things get retconned faster than you can collect 5 issues of something. And if you're, a fan of the Super Sons, you already know what I mean. As far as the Jonathan Kent thing has gone, that's just been one massive cluster since that new writer went on there to mess things up. But that's his history. But this is what makes sense to me. John Osterman can change 1940 events because he was in 1940. He can change the way Superman's origin happens because he's in charge of all the events that happen in the DC universe. He can shift them. He can make them happen differently. He's playing with it. He's trying to understand humanity by creating some humanity, and he keeps recreating it until he gets it right. He was the architect of the Crisis on Infinite Earths. He was the architect of the multiverse because he got to play with multiple versions of the same thing at the same time to see which ones panned out better than others. He was the architect of 0 Hour. He is that hand holding the stars. And every time there's a reboot in the DC universe, it's because Dr. Manhattan is trying to get it right. So let me know what you think about this. The comments are open. I would love to hear your theories. I would actually love to hear Geoff Johns address this in some fashion. I would just to understand, if that's not the case, then how does Dr. Manhattan time travel when he's never been able to time travel before? Other than that, I thought that Doomsday Clock is a very well-told story. It's certainly exciting. I wish to goodness that DC editorial had given it the proper treatment that it deserves, but they don't seem to do that. And until they do, they're going to continue to suffer in their storytelling until they get some cohesion going there. If you like this kind of broadcast, please do hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. And hit that bell for notifications. That way you'll get a little pop-up on your phone that lets you know that, hey, RJ's coming in here. He's got some stuff to say. That'll really help us out. We are trying to get up to the 1,000 subscriber mark. That is the limit that YouTube has for any live stream or broadcaster, so that they can, begin the monetization process. I love talking to you guys all day long, but I do got to eat. So we're trying to make this thing into something that's going to be profitable for us. Drop us a line on the comments, drop us a like. Anything there helps us out, gets this channel noticed, and we do appreciate every single thing you guys do for us. If there's anything that you think we should be covering more closely, anything that you would like to have us weigh in on, give an opinion, let us know. We're here for you, and we can't wait to hear from you. Thanks for popping in, guys.